Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something that's always kind of fascinated me. It's China's Singles Day.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the just colossal online shopping extravaganza that seems to just break records year after year. But
Yeah.
we're getting signals that maybe, just maybe, things are shifting a little bit this year.
Yeah.
We've got some really insightful reports from Bloomberg, the Associated Press, and the South China Morning Post.
Okay.
And we're going to unpack all of it to answer a pretty crucial question.
Right.
Is Singles Day losing its mojo?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's not as simple as a yes or no answer.
Yeah.
I think we need to kind of understand the bigger picture here.
Yeah.
Singles Day, for those unfamiliar, was dreamt up by Alibaba
Yeah.
back in 2009, turning November 11th into, a shopping phenomenon.
Right.
But China's economic landscape is undergoing some changes. We're seeing some real estate anxieties, and the specter of deflation is looming. This naturally has an impact on consumer confidence, and that's where the intrigue begins.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Speaking of consumer confidence, the AP article really highlighted this shift with some personal stories that caught my eye.
Oh, really?
One was a fitness center owner in Beijing mentioned she's cutting back this year, only buying essentials.
Okay.
And there was also a barber in Xi'an who felt like those Singles Day deals weren't all they were cracked up to be.
Interesting. It's interesting how these personal anecdotes bring the data to life.
Sure.
Deflation is a tricky concept.
Yeah.
Essentially, when prices are expected to fall, people hold back on spending because they believe they can get a better deal later. It creates this kind of economic inertia.
Oh, wow.
And this is where
Yeah.
the analysis from Michelle Chang at Goldman Sachs comes into play. The Bloomberg piece quoted her saying that more economic stimulus is needed to kind of get Chinese consumers feeling confident again.
So it's not just a feeling. There's a real economic basis for this shift.
Right.
And this leads us to another interesting twist.
Okay.
Singles Day isn't even a 24-hour event anymore. Platforms like Alibaba and JD.com are kicking off promotions weeks in advance.
Wow.
Could this be diluting the impact, making it less of a concentrated shopping frenzy?
Yeah, that's one theory. And it's fueled further by the fact that
Yeah.
platforms have become less transparent about their total sales figures. Before we would see these eye-popping numbers splashed across headlines. But now it's more subdued. Cinten, a data provider, estimated only a 2% growth in sales across major platforms last year.
Wow.
That's far cry from the double-digit growth we saw pre-pandemic.
2%. That's practically flatlining.
Yeah.
It sounds like merchants must be feeling the pressure too, not just consumers.
Absolutely. The South China Morning Post painted a really vivid picture of this. They featured Vao Gao, a garment factory owner,
Okay.
who, after crunching the numbers, realized he's barely breaking even. After accounting for all the advertising fees, he shelled out to be a part of Singles Day.
No, wow.
He even admitted to feeling disillusioned by the complex
Yeah.
promotion rules. It's just not as straightforward as it used to be.
That's understandable. But it's not the same story for every merchant, is it?
Yeah.
The article also mentioned Dubayonian,
Oh,
a mutton processor in Inner Mongolia.
okay.
His sales are down too. But he sees participating in Singles Day as a way to build long-term brand visibility. Even if it doesn't translate into a massive one-day sales spike, he's even thinking about expanding to other platforms.
Interesting. This highlights a potential shift in the dynamic between these e-commerce platforms and the merchants who rely on them.
Yeah.
Are they becoming less about driving a short-term
Yeah.
sales frenzy and more about providing year-round visibility for businesses? It's a question worth considering if you unpack this further.
So if Singles Day is losing some of its shine, what's Alibaba doing about it? I can't imagine they're just
That's right.
sitting back and watching their golden goose stop laying golden eggs.
Right. They're definitely adapting instead of chasing sheer volume.
And those crazy price wars of the past. There's a noticeable shift towards quality over quantity they seem to be focusing on, catering to their high-value shoppers. Now, that's a strategy that makes sense in a changing economic climate.
And speaking of high-value shoppers,
Yeah.
the SCMP article mentioned Alibaba's 88 VIP program, essentially a loyalty program.
Right.
For their top spenders,
Right.
60% more of these VIPs participated in Singles Day this year compared to last. And their average spending was up by 30%.
Wow.
So while overall growth might be slowing, they're seeing significant gains within specific segments.
That's interesting. What's fascinating here is that this could be a reflection of broader spending habits in a time of economic uncertainty.
Yeah.
Remember that line from the AP article, trading a Gucci bag for Lululemon?
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps it suggests that. Consumers are still willing to spend, but they're becoming more discerning, more focused on value and practicality.
Okay, so Alibaba's doubling down on their high-end customers. What other tricks do they have up their sleeve to navigate these changing tides?
Well, both Alibaba and JD.com are increasingly looking beyond China's borders for growth.
They're making it easier for merchants to sell globally, offering things like global free shipping and simplifying cross-border logistics. It's a strategic move, given the slowing domestic demand.
And it seems to be paying off, at least according to Alibaba. They claim that 70,000 merchants doubled their sales thanks to this global free shipping initiative.
Wow.
They also saw new customer numbers double in key markets like Singapore and Hong Kong. So as the domestic market matures, they're finding new avenues for growth. Internationally, it makes you wonder what the future holds for this once uniquely Chinese shopping event.
It certainly does raise some interesting questions about the future of Singles Day. Will this focus on high-end consumers and global expansion be enough to revitalize the event and bring back the explosive growth of the past?
Or are we witnessing the beginning of a new era for Singles Day, one where it's less about breaking sales records and more about finding a sustainable model for both buyers and sellers in a rapidly changing world? These are the questions we'll be exploring as we continue our deep dive into the evolving landscape of China's Singles Day.
It's fascinating to see how these global ambitions kind of tie back to the original concept of Singles Day.
Yeah.
What started as this lighthearted celebration of singlehood, kind of a counterpoint to Valentine's Day, is now with this global push almost becoming a symbol of consumerism itself, transcending cultural boundaries.
Yeah, that's a really insightful observation. And it reminds us that even with talk of slowing growth, we're still talking about massive numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Even a 2% increase on a base of over 1 trillion yuan is a staggering amount of economic activity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crucial to remember the scale we're dealing with here. But what's particularly interesting is not just the raw numbers, but the underlying shifts taking place. The motivations of consumers and merchants are evolving, and these e-commerce giants are having to adapt their strategies in response.
So we've talked about the economic factors at play, the shift towards quality over quantity, and the global aspirations of platforms like Alibaba. But what does all of this mean for the average Chinese consumer? Are they feeling this shift as well?
Well, if we look at those personal stories from the AP article, it seems like people are becoming more cautious, more deliberate with their spending. They're not as easily swayed by flashy promotions or the hype of a one-day shopping frenzy.
Right.
They're asking, do I really need this?
Yeah.
Or is this really a good deal?
Which makes perfect sense given the economic anxieties we discussed earlier.
sure.
People are worried about their jobs.
Or the value of their homes. They're getting more careful with their wallets.
Precisely. This is what I meant earlier when I talked about a recalibration. Consumers are recalibrating their spending habits. Merchants are recalibrating their approach to Singles Day. And the platforms themselves are recalibrating their growth strategies. It's a fascinating dance playing out on a massive scale.
It's like watching a giant economic ecosystem adapt to changing conditions in real time. And speaking of adaptations, let's circle back to Alibaba for a moment. We talked about their focus on high-value shoppers, but the SCMP article also hinted at other interesting changes they're implementing. Yes, they're trying to foster a more balanced and sustainable ecosystem for both buyers and sellers. In the past, they've been criticized for prioritizing consumers over merchants, but now they seem to be recognizing the importance of a healthy relationship between both sides of the marketplace.
So what does that look like in practice? What are they doing differently?
For one, they're giving merchants more control over their pricing and promotions. They're also providing more support and resources to help merchants succeed, not just during Singles Day, but throughout the year.
Okay.
There's a shift away from that. Get them while they're hot mentality toward a more long-term collaborative approach.
That does seem like a pretty significant departure from the buyer is always right attitude we often see in e-commerce.
It is, and it reflects a growing understanding that the long-term success of these platforms depends on the well-being of both buyers and sellers. A healthy marketplace benefits everyone.
So it's not just about maximizing sales at all costs anymore. It's about creating more equitable and sustainable ecosystem.
Exactly. And that's a key takeaway here. It speaks to a broader evolution in how we think about online shopping. It's no longer just about finding the cheapest price or the biggest discount. It's about finding value, authenticity, and perhaps even a sense of connection with the brands and merchants we support.
It's almost like we're witnessing a shift in the very soul of online shopping.
And that's a really encouraging trend because at the end of the day, e-commerce should be about more than
Yeah.
just transactions.
Right.
It should be about building relationships, fostering trust, and creating a more vibrant and diverse marketplace that benefits everyone involved.
Beautifully said. So where does this leave us with Singles Day? Is this the end of an era or the beginning of something new and even more exciting?
I think it's
I think so.
too early to say for sure. But what we can say is that Singles Day is at a crossroads. It's no longer the unbridled growth story of the past, and that's okay. It's a reflection of a maturing market, a changing consumer landscape, and a world grappling with new economic realities.
So less about the fireworks and more about the foundation, less about the spectacle and more about the substance.
Precisely. And that's why I find this entire evolution so fascinating. It's a microcosm of the larger shifts happening in the global economy. And it challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about what the future of consumption might look like.
Well said. It seems we've reached a critical juncture in our exploration of Singles Day. All right, so we're back, ready to synthesize everything we've learned in our deep dive into this evolving landscape of China's Singles Day. It's been a journey
Yes.
from the dizzying heights of record-breaking sales figures to a much more nuanced and complex reality.
Right.
So as we wrap up, what are the key takeaways for our listeners? What's the big aha moment we want them to walk away with?
Well, I think the most important takeaway here
Yeah.
is that Singles Day is at a very pivotal moment. This untouchable, unstoppable force it once seemed to be is now facing some genuine challenges. Its future is uncertain, but this uncertainty itself is incredibly interesting.
It's not a simple narrative of decline, is it?
No, not at all.
It's more about adaptation, about evolution.
Exactly.
We're seeing platforms like Alibaba experimenting with new strategies, looking beyond China's borders for growth, and trying to create a more balanced ecosystem for both buyers and sellers.
Exactly what we're witnessing is recalibration happening in real time. Consumers are becoming more discerning with their spending. Merchants are adapting to these new realities, and the platforms themselves are having to rethink their approach to growth. It's a fascinating interplay of forces.
And all of this is unfolding against a backdrop of global economic uncertainty, which adds another layer of complexity to the story.
Absolutely. The economic headwinds facing China are very real, and they have a ripple effect on everything, from consumer confidence to merchant profitability.
So where does this leave us? What can we anticipate for the future of Singles Day?
Well, that's the million-yuan question, unfortunately. I don't have a crystal ball. However, I believe we're seeing a shift away from the pursuit of sheer scale, a more sustainable model. The focus is shifting towards quality over quantity, building long-term value over chasing short-term gains, and finding a more equitable balance between the needs of buyers and sellers.
And this model also seems less China-centric and more global in its reach.
Precisely as China's domestic market matures, these e-commerce giants are setting their sights on global expansion, and that's likely to have a profound impact on the future of Singles Day.
It feels like we're on the cusp of a new era for this shopping event. Less about smashing sales records and more about charting a sustainable path forward in a rapidly changing world.
I think that's a great way to put it. And it brings us to a final, thought-provoking question for our listeners. Will this new focus on high-end consumers, global expansion, and a more balanced ecosystem be enough to revitalize Singles Day and usher in a new era of growth? Or are we observing the beginning of a gradual decline? Only time will tell. But it's going to be a fascinating journey to follow.
We'll be watching closely, and on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the future of Singles Day. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
For another exploration of the forces shaping our world